Hello and welcome back to The Atmosphere is Electric. As always, there's Fran and I'm Rich. How are you, dude?
Really well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty chipper, all things
Good.
considering. It's very wet, very wet and dark, but other than that, life is good.
Yeah, it's minging, isn't it?
Bring on the summer, mate. Bring on the summer. Having said that, there's no football in the summer, so hold fire on the summer. Let's keep the winter. Keep the winter. We have to start. We always give ourselves, to be fair, we don't always, but we tend to try to give ourselves a bit of a shout out when we've done well at predictions. Last week, I think it's fair to say, was a difficult game week, wasn't it? We didn't quite hit the dizzy heights, but there were still some little nuggets in there. But overall, not our best weekend of predictions, it's fair to say.
No, it wasn't. I got 4 out of 10 with one correct score, and I'm pretty sure you got 5, but with 3 correct scores. So, I mean, if you fancy a few quid on a few correct scores, you've done all right there. But we both got 3-1 City, didn't we? We both nailed that. We were adamant about that. So there were some positives.
And that was my banker of the week. I can't remember what your banker was actually. What was your banker?
my banker was Spurs.
Oh, clown. Yeah, at the time, I remember putting you back in your box for that one. That was a crazy talk. And look, of course, we'll touch on the impact some of those results had or have had on the kind of the league table as we go through this week's fixtures. But, it'd be very remiss of us not to touch on... I'm going to use the phrase transfer window very loosely. I might change it to, you have the opportunity to flirt with some players but not actually purchase any window. For me, this is becoming a bit of a non-entity. Might as well scrap it, but there's still so many teams that need to do so much business. This weekend's either going to be the craziest weekend ever, or it's just going to absolutely peter out into nothing, isn't it?
Well, you called it last week that you think you'll see a lot of loans happening, and that's the direction of travel that you're hearing about, isn't it? There's not many teams that are looking. Well, lots of teams are looking for permanent transfers, but none of them seem to be coming to fruition. So there's so many teams in the league that need reinforcements. They need new players, especially players that go into their starting 11 just to give them a boost, whether it's at the top end or the bottom end of the table. And nothing seems to be happening. So it'll be an interesting few days. I think the question is can teams get them over the line? Because you know what some of the transfers are like, they're difficult.
So, like a serious question, and what should we do with this? Because like we touched on it last week. It's almost getting to the point now where it's so difficult to do a deal because you're either at the top, you don't want to lose a player, you're at the bottom, you don't want to lose a player. You don't want to sell to a rival to make them better because that can then come back and bite you on the backside during the season. Like, what is the solution? What could be a solution to this? Because actually, there's lots of people making lots of noise about the transfer window with not a lot of return.
I've never really been a fan of the January window, if I'm being honest. It was quite good a fair few years ago. When I don't know whether Torres went in the January window, by the way, but when there was those sorts of transfers going on and for big money and the Premier League stood out from everyone else, that was when sort of Jim White came into his own, didn't he? Like, he was the transfer guru. Like, that was relatively exciting. And I remember once staying up around deadline day to see who was coming in, who was going out, because it was exciting. That hasn't happened for years now. So I'd personally go back to just having a summer window. I think the best clubs generally tend to have their summer windows nailed down, and they don't really need to go into January. January is for clubs that are struggling, that aren't being managed well. So it almost forces your ownership and your recruitment team to do a good job in the summer, or you're screwed for the rest of the season. So for me personally, I'd go back to just a summer window.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm old enough to remember back in the day where you could buy a player at any point right up to the sort of almost the first week in April, and then there was this kind of mad scramble for some crazy loans, and that's not right either. It's just, like I say, I think football is in danger of kind of eating itself a little bit here and actually starting to almost pee some people off, because having the window gives fans a focus, doesn't it? There's lots of fans, and we don't need to work out which teams they are. They're generally speaking the teams at the bottom. Having said that, Arsenal fans are completely bemoaning about the lack of Ford coming in there as well. And so if there wasn't a window, at least all of the fans would have something else to kind of focus on and actually maybe focus on the football rather than focus on the window and the sporting directors, which is a new role, which didn't used to exist. There's now all these sporting directors that still can't get a transfer done during January. Like, it just doesn't actually make any sense to me what we're doing here.
Well, the money's sloshing around as well. I mean, I think that the January window is a really good window for clubs like Forest, as an example, when you're in a situation that you wouldn't have expected at the beginning of the season, that you have the opportunity to go and bolster and get you over the line. However, some of the targets that have been mentioned with them seem really good and plausible targets, but clubs have so much money now, like Wolves as an example. They can afford to say no to 30, 40 million, can't they, for Cunha, and just sit on it because it's going to help them with their Premier League survival as well. Same with Vista for Brentford. They can afford now to just say, no, thank you. Whereas previously, 10, 20 million would have been snap their hands off for it.
It's the gamble, isn't it, of staying up versus going down, and the impact of, can you still going to have a transfer fee in the summer? So it's not like they're losing out on that completely if they do stay up or go down. And actually, they probably feel that they're more likely to stay up if he does stick around. And of course, that then creates the whole wealth sort of pathway that we do. I mean, if you was to sort of say there's one team in the next 4 days or whatever's left of the window, because obviously it goes through to Monday, the 3rd of February, I think it is, if there's one team that just has to go out and move heaven and earth to get something or someone in, which team would you be sort of screaming at, going, for the love of God, get a deal done?
Well, I'm going to give you three. So I'm going to give you Wolves. I think Wolves are crucial. They need some players just to bolster the ranks to ensure that they can stay in the league. I think the next one is going to be Leicester. I think they're on the exact same thing. They need some players to try and get them over the line for relegation purposes. And then from the other end of the table, I think Arsenal. I think Arsenal are in desperate need of a forward, somebody who can put the ball in the back of the net. If they're going to mount a challenge to Liverpool for the remainder of the season, they have to have some reinforcements. So I'll give you three there for different reasons.
Well, I can't believe that one of them wasn't Spurs, to be honest with you. With 8 fit outfield players above the age of 18, that is a surprise.
I mean, the only reason why I didn't really include Spurs in that is because I think they're far too good to go down. They're not going to be challenging for Europe already, so it's almost a write-off the season. If you can get some of those injured players back, then the Spurs will finish mid-table. And it's not going to be a good season, but realistically, what is there to challenge? I know that the Spurs are still in a cup, but it is bringing in 7, 8 new players as an example. I know it's not going to happen now, but bringing in 7, 8 players, they're not challenging for anything. So almost write the season off and start again in the summer would be where I would go with that.
Yeah, it's fair. I think the Spurs faithful will tell you that they're technically still got a chance of 3 cups. Obviously, big couple of weeks, and obviously they play Liverpool and Aston Villa in both the Carabao Cup semi-final and the next round of the FA Cup in the same week, which I think is actually next week. So actually to have got some reinforcements into the squad might have given them a chance of getting to the final. I know that it's a long shot going to Anfield with a 1-0 lead, but like I said, you're absolutely right. Spurs shouldn't be focusing on the league, but actually you could argue if they could get to 2 finals this season and maybe find a way of winning one of them, that could be deemed as a successful, should be deemed as a successful season. But of course,
is it
Daniel?
I say, is it difficult to find those players? Because you're talking about non-cup tied players now as well, aren't you? So it's probably going to be very difficult to find this. I mean, your only option is to go abroad. So the Premier League would be cut off to Spurs. So it probably just makes those deals a little bit harder, doesn't it? But again, you go back to with good planning. Spurs have had injuries for a long while now. It's not like it's just been sprung upon them. With good planning, they should be bringing in 3. I mean, even loans. Bring in a couple of loans to bolster the ranks. That's the way that should be going.
Yeah, absolutely. Spurs have absolutely missed their window of opportunity, which was actually December, to get these deals lined up when they knew that the injury crisis started. And let's be honest, even before an injury crisis, one of the teams that looked very weak and threadbare in certain positions. So actually, these signings should have been wrapped up long before the window started, which again is what frustrates, I think, a lot of fans, is that it's almost like teams go, there's a transfer window from the 1st of January, and that's when we can start doing our activity, when actually you could have 3 players already wrapped up and actually join you on the 1st of January, ready to go.
Yeah.
We're nearly in February now, and lots of teams are still scratching around. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense to me. I say some of the teams down the bottom, I know, so Wolves keep going in for, I think it's Danso, who's a centre-half at Lens. He's already failed a medical at somewhere, and they've gone back in for him again. It seems like they're just running off a list of players that they've got, and they keep going back in for them. Like there's no forward plan in there. There's no imagination. Like I think, but you could throw that at a lot of clubs. Like where is the strategy behind what clubs need? You said, I mean, the only one that I've seen where I've gone, that's great planning so far, is Bournemouth. Bournemouth went and bought an Argentinian left back, I think he was, knowing that Kirkus is being looked at, possibly going to go. So they've gone into January, very early in January, got him through the door. And I think that's how you plan your transfers, your club strategy. I don't see that from, I mean, include Arsenal in that. I know Man City seem to have done pretty well as well, don't they? They've gone and identified lots of young players and brought them into the squad. So good forward planning. But Arsenal have needed a forward for 2 seasons now. Where are the links? I've not even seen any links to forwards, really.
Well, there's Benjamin Sesko, which again I don't see getting over the line in January. Obviously, there's Victor Osimhen again. I don't see that one getting done over in January. So you're quite right. Is that yeah? Like I say, it leads me back to the conversation around what is the point of having academies. Well, I know we're talking about transfers and getting new players in, but there must be somebody in this structure of Arsenal that can play the number 9 role, that's been there long enough, that's been trained in the Mikel Arteta sort of system that you can give a go to. Bearing in mind that they recently sold Nketiah, that was meant to be sort of the next hope, and he's not exactly putting up trees at Crystal Palace. Like who's coming through that plays that position in Arsenal, because they do look woefully short.
Well, I was going to raise the Nketiah point. That sale, along with the Emile Smith-Rowe sellers now, that just seemed madness, doesn't it? Because they've not actually gone out and found a replacement for them. I think the second point is there was a youngster, wasn't it? His name Chadibo Martin or whatever it was, who's gone to United. That seems more and more bonkers by the day, doesn't it? Because now that the centre forwards have been injured, surely he'd have been given a chance. And if he's as good as what people are saying is, he'd have made an impact.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I think we're in a really interesting part of sort of the next phase of football, where systems overtake individuality football. Where we talk about, what is the point of a youth system? What is the point of a youth structure? Whether you're a smaller Premier League club and you nurture somebody for it to get pinched by the bigger club, who then doesn't do anything with them and loans them out to a European team. Like, it just feels like we're in this kind of really kind of weird cycle of somebody needs to break it and do something different. Otherwise, we're just going to go round and round in circles.
Yeah, no, I agree. Something needs to happen. This is because academies are becoming pretty pointless. Lots of smaller clubs are having their talent pinched and stockpiled. It's not very often that they get pinched and then go through to the first team we've spoken about before. And even the big clubs are struggling to get youth products through. So you do come back to what is the point of having an academy? The only point I can see at the minute is the Man City model, where you're developing them to sell them on for profit.
Yeah, and that's fine. The problem with all of this is that actually every fan of every club wants to see young, homegrown players that have come from the academy. Everyone loves someone that's started in the academy at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that makes it through to the first team. They're the sort of stories that we all cling on to and long for and love. And so we all probably get a little bit too emotionally attached to the academy, whereas actually, like you say, it's just a business, and the parents and the kids need to see themselves as a commodity rather than the player, because the clubs actually don't care about them.
No, but like I said, the reason why the fans do latch onto them is, when they say they're one of their own, is because they're living the dream of what the fans pursue as their dream as well. They're literally living it. And in most cases, you would like to think that those players give more than somebody who's been signed for 20 million from a foreign country. And that's the reason that they latch onto it. But when they then see chances not being given to those players, PSR actively encouraging them to be sold because it's pure profit, like, everything just stinks, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, like I say, football's in danger of, whether it be the changes of the laws, the VAR-ness of it all, the poor refereeing, the cost of it in terms of both in the ground and now to sit in your front room and watch it. We're in danger of losing that kind of human element to the game that actually is the lifeblood of it. And actually, I can see more and more people sort of switching off and going to watch that more grassroots kind of national league kind of, local step 2, step 3 club, where you actually you feel you're part of the movement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm even going to say, I've watched a lot of Championship football recently, last year, the year before that. So I watched one of the most boring games I've ever seen in Burnley Leeds. However, how nice it is to not have VAR. And I know there's talk of it coming into the Championship. I mean, that would be the world's biggest mistake for me. But it's such a breath of fresh air when you watch that game. Put aside the 0-0 boring game that you saw, but it's such a breath of fresh air just to watch it, to not have those controversies, to have football back.
Yeah, that was an interesting watch. That one, wasn't it? That was a tough evening. I even dialed out at half time, and I've got a vested interest in Leeds. I like Leeds. And even I had to tap out of that one.
Yeah, did you watch any of the Millwall Portsmouth game last night?
No, I was on the sort of roundup show, so I was keeping an eye on all the games.
I had a look on. It was the only game of football on. I watched it. Let me tell you, it was the worst standard of football I've ever seen. I've never seen the ball in the air for as long a period as I've seen. Honestly, every time they got the ball, the players had time and space, and they just lumped it. Like, it was a bit of a throwback. Like, it was pretty refreshing, but it was standard wise from what we're used to now. It was unbelievably poor.
Yeah. Again, yeah, football has to be careful. It needs to be entertaining. We need to be entertained, and there needs to be some excitement. And I think actually football may be starting to lose a little bit of that. And the transfer window used to be exciting, as you rightly say. I remember staying up to 2:00 in the morning, just to find out if there was a late last minute deal from somewhere. And like you say, the whole Jim White kind of. I appreciate it's now moved to Romano, but it was great, wasn't it? And the reporters outside the stadium, the fans there with the inflatables and other things, sort of poking them in the head. It was good times.
Yeah, the big dildo. Go on, you can say it.
Oh, but I wasn't going to, but because I'm not, it's not my cup of tea. But yeah, I think I remember it being purple as well, if I'm honest with you, which is an unusual choice. But anyway, let's move on.
Good memory. Nice to see you remember them sort of things.
Well, it gets. I think every January gets thrust back upon us, doesn't it? On one of the social medias where they're like, these were the good old days.
Let me tell you now, it's a great phrase you've just used as well.
What was that?
Gets thrust upon you.
Oh, sorry. Freudian slip, mate. No, I'd love to say that was intentional, but it definitely wasn't. Okay, look, let's kick off with we're back to an early Saturday game, which is great. I actually missed them when they're not on. This one's really interesting, and look, we spoke about this really briefly. I think this is a really, really interesting week. Actually, one of the most interesting weeks for fixtures in quite a while. Nottingham Forest host Brighton at the City Ground. Obviously, let's start with Nottingham Forest. For me, this is going to be really interesting to see how they bounce back from the absolute battering they took last week at the hands of Bournemouth. It was 5; it could have been more.
It could have been more, couldn't it? And that's not even an exaggeration. It could have been 7 or 8. I was really shocked by it, if I'm being honest, just because of obviously the way that Forest have been playing, but their main strength being their defence. The fact that they shipped 5 goals and in the manner that they did, it was almost going back to the Forest of old. So the question is, has the bubble burst, and how do they bounce back from this? Because Brighton are a decent team.
Yes, it's going to be very interesting. Do you think it was just almost a perfect storm for Nottingham Forest, where they've come into a red hot Bournemouth, who have got the system now? That as much as they're missing some players through injury, let's not go down that route. But they have kept that 11 relatively straightforward. They haven't lost with the centre back pairing since they came in through injuries. So again, shows some strength in depth. Or do you think that teams are now starting to work out Nottingham Forest, and actually this could be the start of that perceptual kind of downfall that we've all been predicting or waiting for? Which way do you? Because I don't think it could be both, but it could be one or the other, couldn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to go with. I don't think it's that you're going to start seeing Forest on a decline. I do think that Bournemouth's style of play possibly just played into the hands of the way that Forest played into Bournemouth's hands. They are quite free flowing. They do play the ball through the lines very well, which is why I think Brighton is going to be a very interesting game, because they're quite similar team to Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth probably just a bit more tactically flexible, and they've got a bit more pace about them. The way that Bournemouth press, I think they press a bit harder than Brighton, but on the ball, I think Brighton are quite a similar style of team. So I think that means that it's going to be a very interesting game. I do think Forest will take some lessons from the Bournemouth game though, so I can see this being pretty tight. I think he'll probably revert back a bit more defensive than usual. He's possibly, as the winds have been flowing, I think Nuno's opened them up a little bit more. So I think he'll possibly tighten that back up just to get back on track.
And obviously on the other side of this, Brighton suffered. Certainly 3 weeks ago would have been a massive shock. Obviously, with David Moyes going in, obviously there's 2 wins on the bounce. They've had the new manager, old new manager bounce. So it wasn't like the world's biggest surprise, but it's still a shock that Brighton lost at home. I think the surprise for me was that they didn't score, didn't really look like scoring particularly. And so actually, both of these teams need to really kind of have a bounce back here, because if they don't, if both teams go 2 games, you can really see both teams starting to fall down that league and become out of whatever they're chasing for, whether it be Champions League or European football.
Yeah, I thought the interesting thing for me was, I didn't watch the game, but I saw the stats and I saw match of the day. And Brighton had a lot of the ball. Everton had 1 shot on target and scored. So it was almost going back to the old Graham Potter days of having lots of the ball, looking neat and tidy, but having no end product. So it'll be interesting to see what they do that, because obviously since De Zerbi came in, he sort of changed that XG, didn't he? He's gone from having lots of XG but not scoring the chances to actually converting. So it'll be interesting to see how they go with that, because I know Danny Welbeck has been coming back into some fitness. So yeah, very interesting to see. And I know Mitoma is the key for them. When he's on form, I think he just opens teams up, doesn't he?
Well, it's like we said, actually a very interesting game to kick off the week. And again, last week we kind of sat here somewhat foolishly now, sort of going, oh yeah, we're both going to have the same results. I think this week could be very interesting, and I could see even now, I could see all three of the outcomes happening in that game, and it wouldn't be a surprise either way, being honest with you.
No, I agree, which possibly means you can tell which way I'm going.
Oh yeah, you all sit on the fence, you are for sure, definitely. When you phone me, it comes up Splinter as your name. You don't phone me, it doesn't come up Splinter at all. We move on. We just spoke about them on the other side of that coin. Bournemouth, absolutely flying, quite rightly getting plaudits all over the place. Every time someone's talking about a manager in risk, Iriola's the first name that gets kind of banded about by the fan base, I think more in hope than expectation. This, for me, could be the game of the weekend. Now, of course, when the fixtures were released, they didn't think this could be as exciting as it is, but Bournemouth host Liverpool at the Vitality. Again, Liverpool historically have struggled down there. I remember there being a very famous high score, and I think it was 4-3 Bournemouth win that feels like not that long ago. It was probably 5 years ago now. But, Bournemouth are the red-hot form team. Can you see them causing an upset here against the all-conquering Liverpool?
Oh, you can definitely see them causing an upset. I mean, do I think that they're going to be able to beat Liverpool? I think it's going to be a very tough ask just because of how strong Liverpool are. But they're the form team. They're playing unbelievably well. They're scoring goals for fun. They're very tight at the back. So you'd probably say out of any team in the league at this minute in time who's going to cause Liverpool the most problems, you'd have to back Bournemouth, which is, you've said it's game of the game week. Where else? I mean, you can look at Arsenal, Man City as an example, but I think with the form of both of them, the way that they've both not really been scoring goals, Bournemouth are absolutely flying. This is game of the game week by a mile.
Yeah, and again, ebbs and flows, right? And when I'm talking about stylistically, I'm talking about excitement, I'm talking about intrigue factor, and also, by the way, I think we've all been stung so many times in the past where you have the big 4:30 blockbuster that ends up being not that great, right? And both teams, Arsenal and Man City, aren't the free-flowing teams they were possibly 12 months ago. Of course, I'll look forward to sitting down and watching it, and I expect to be, a great game. But when I talk about actually sort of intrigue as to how it's going to turn out, how the two systems are going to fit, because, some teams are starting to work Liverpool out. Liverpool have got a midweek game this week as well. So, again, the rotation. But the one thing that's really impressing me with Bournemouth is that kind of front three, front four, and Utawara or Ouattara.
Django Ouattara.
Yeah, we'll call him Django just for the time being. I feel more and more like Paul Merson every day, struggling with these names. But, what they're squeezing out of their pips, for me, Justin Kluivert, when they signed him, was a very average player. Didn't really put up any trees in Syria, in Roma. Semenyo, again, under the radar, come through the lower levels. They're just doing some great pieces. And again, there was one guy that triple captain Django this weekend. Like, how are you seeing that? Where are you pulling that from?
Most of these people, when you see that, because you saw like the level of points that some of them got, and you've just gone, how on earth have you thought that that's a good idea? Which it tells you, though, one person's done it, so it clearly wasn't. Just worked out well, didn't it? Yeah, no, I mean, on the Bournemouth front, like I said, I'm really impressed, like I said, by the front four, but by the rotation. Like, they don't seem to have singular roles, do they? You see Kluivert going left, going right, he pops into the 9. Ouattara will drop in and go wide. Semenyo's constantly switching wings, constantly going down either foot. Like, they've got so much flexibility and unpredictability about them that it must be very hard as a coach of another team to go, right, left back, I need you to stay here because you know that Semenyo's going to go down the wing. You're having to constantly think of 4 or 5 different defensive plans because they're so unpredictable.
And of course, last time they were on Monday Night Football, Jamie Carragher did a great piece on Ryan Christie and the work that he's doing. And again, another player that, being honest with you, most people probably wouldn't have thought of.
You'd have turned your noses up, wouldn't you? Turn your nose. If it signed for your club, you'd turn your noses up at him.
Well, you'd definitely be going, what we thinking here. But actually, even Tyler Adams, and again, let's not forget last season, they were sort of more so with injuries, and Tyler Adams didn't come in and play many games. But you look at that midfield, and you wouldn't think, like, David Brooks, again, very talented young man, but again, obviously come back from injury. Tyler Adams, Justin Kluivert, Semenyo, like, you wouldn't look at that on paper and go, my God, that is going to be tearing teams apart. But they are week in, week out.
I think what it just shows is that if you get a coach who's very good tactically and can improve players, that's what, clubs to the level of Bournemouth, and I mean that with the biggest amount of respect, they're not a top club, are they? But if you can get a coach that can improve players, buy players for moderate fees and improve them to levels and set a tactical style, you've got a chance. And I think it just proves how what a job that Bournemouth have done there. One, with their scouting and recruitment, but two, the scouting and recruitment of the managers as well. Because when he was hired, most people predicted that they were going to be relegated because they were going, he's got no Premier League experience. What on earth are they doing? Just got rid of Gary Neal. He'd done so well. It's a masterstroke.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, how quickly football can turn. And the one I use, and I remember us talking about Evan Ferguson, feels like 12 months ago, we were talking about 150 million. What a great future he's got. He's going to be the next. Well, yeah, now they can't give him away.
No, well, clubs are in for him on loan, aren't they? But they want to try before you buy.
But they literally can't, he's so. And again, you look at managers. You talk about Gary O'Neill. At the time, we were going Gary O'Neill. Even feels like 4 months ago. He's fantastic. He's doing a great job at Wolves. Look at the piece he's done, and now he's out of work. It's just amazing how quickly football moves. And if you don't keep, it's just and that when you look at someone like Mo Salah, as an example, plays for Liverpool, for him to have done it at the top level for as long as he has makes it even more impressive, doesn't it? Compared to some of these guys that have a good 3-month window and you never sort of really hear of them again.
Well, and the first person that sprung to mind there, if somebody's had a purple patch, is Mateta. Now, he has improved his levels and he's a Premier League striker now, but the purple patch that he had last year, that's not his true form, is it? So it goes back to your point about Salah. When you're constantly doing it year after year after year, it just shows how great a player, manager, whatever it is that we're talking about, it just shows how great they are when you do it with that longevity.
And Liverpool, obviously, still sitting top of the league, relatively, hunky-dory, doing well in the Champions League. For me, the thing that they've got over the rest of the teams is they've been able to rotate their front three as and when, as often as they want, in-game, halfway through the game. Last week, obviously, struggling to break down Brentford. Darwin Núñez is the game changer. They've just seems to have enough firepower. I don't know, Jota doesn't get spoken about enough. Luis Diaz is having a great season. Obviously, Cody Gakpo chips in. They've just seemed to have the edge, don't they, in that final third, which can make or break a result in the last few minutes.
Yeah, and the more that I look at Liverpool, I do think it's being built off that defensive stability as well, knowing that they're not going to be conceding, often lots of goals, one at the most. That then when you have that, when you are struggling to break a team down, you can bring 2-3 subs on who are going to give you that extra energy against tiring teams. And the way that they control the ball now, I think you are seeing more late goals from Liverpool, aren't you? In tight games, they are able to bring on energetic players against a tired team. So yeah, I think that's the main reason why I do think Liverpool will go on to win this game. I think they will control the ball, and also Bournemouth with their very high energetic press. I think as the game starts to go later, I think they are just going to probably run out of legs because of their injury problems. They're not going to have the subs, are they, to be able to rotate with the same quality. So I do feel that Liverpool will probably win this late.
Well, don't ruin your predictions. Don't ruin your predictions. But very, very interesting game. And just wish I could actually watch it in its entirety because I'd really like to look at the tactical battle there as well. But we move on to I think we're still going to call it a relegation 6-pointer after the back end of last week's results. Both teams winning. If you had that in a double, you've done well. Everton obviously beating Brighton away and Leicester beating Spurs away. At Goodison Park, this one feels like a home banker to me. Just because of the new manager bounce at the stadium. Can you put any case together for Leicester putting together a win here?
I don't know if I can put a case together for Leicester getting a win, possibly a point, just based on, they're going to be massively buoyed by the win against Spurs. It takes them out of the relegation zone. They've got a huge opportunity against a team who I think they're one place above them. Quite a few points ahead of them. But if Leicester can go and win, it brings Everton right back into the mix. It brings another team into it. So I think just for the magnitude of the game and obviously the level of energy and excitement after the win against Spurs, I can make a case for a point possibly. I just think Everton are going to be too strong at home with David Moyes.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think you're right. I think Everton are, back-to-back wins. Really, the Spurs, ironically, both teams have beaten Spurs, so you could argue that maybe that's the luck of the draw. But obviously, Everton should have been a lot more comfortable than it ended up being. To go to Brighton at any point and get a win is a very, very good sign. And it looks like the whole club's been re-energised by David Moyes coming back. And so, you've said on this many, many times that you can almost guarantee Leicester score a goal. I'd actually say that this is maybe 1 week to go. I don't see Leicester scoring, and so if they're going to get a draw, it's going to need to be 0-0 because Everton still don't score many. So this for me could be a low scoring game that could be 1 goal in it.
Yeah, I think you've probably got the same score as me on this. I mean, Everton have also lost Dominic Calvert-Lewin, haven't they, who was leading the line really well. So Beto, I mean, I do rate Beto. I think he's got a bit about him. But so I can't see Everton scoring bucket loads. Leicester have tightened up the defence. Even though they concede goals, they've stopped conceding as many shots. And, I mean, they don't score many goals recently. So, yeah, I can see this being a home win, like you said, by the odd goal.
Yeah, certainly 3 of Everton's last 5 fixtures have ended 1-0 to one or t'other team, so it wouldn't be a massive surprise if we both went with an Everton 1-0. And if we do, I think we're both sort of in agreement that realistically now we are really talking about 3 from the bottom 4 in any particular order. I think Everton, if I'm being honest, even if Leicester do go on to win the weekend, I think Everton will have enough to see them home with, like I say, with the new manager and what's going on with the club. So unless you think otherwise, do you think otherwise, or do you think it is 3 from the bottom 4 now?
The only way that I can see Everton being dragged into it is one, I think Leicester do have to win. I think they have to win this game to drag them into it. And also if they get an injury to Brathwaite. If Brathwaite gets injured, I can see them having problems because I don't think there's any coincidence that him coming back into the team has massively tightened them up defensively. I think that's the main thing they've got over the rivals is defensively they look rock solid.
Yeah, and look, to be clear, if we're putting Everton in the mix, then we have to put Spurs in the mix because Everton are only 1 point behind them with the game in hand. So actually, if we're saying that Everton are still in there, then so are Spurs. And so we're talking about 3 from 6 because even West Ham have had a bit of a bounce, and obviously Palace have actually picked up 3 wins in the last 5. So actually, there is starting to be a little bit of a gap now between the bottom 6 and the rest of the league. But for me, it will be 3 from the bottom 4 in which order yet still to be decided. But this weekend could give us a real clear indication of which way around that will go. Because if Leicester can get the win, you might start to look like they're starting to cut away from the rest.
I think that's the key for me is Leicester have to win to bring Everton back into it. I'm not putting Spurs in it just because I think with the level of players that they're going to have coming back, they're going to have more than enough to beat teams. But if Everton could get dragged into it if they lose this game, because we'll obviously go on to the next game, but the result of that is also crucial. If Leicester get a win and Southampton win, as an example, like you said, you're starting to build up a bit of a gap there. If Everton win, that takes them miles beyond, and then it is completely between the bottom 4, including Southampton.
Which leads us nicely on to Ipswich hosting Southampton, and actually kind of everything that we just speak about, they're kind of actually possibly is very much linked to this, because if Ipswich win, of course, we could see actually a bit of a flip-flop in the table with obviously Leicester being, if Leicester don't get the win, and again, there's lots of ifs, right? But ultimately, that's what we're here to talk about. There's 1 point between the 3 of them. I think even if Southampton win, we can say the only thing that will be doing is actually dragging Ipswich down or further down with them rather than getting them out of trouble. I think it's fair to say that they're done and done. But you'd have to say that this is, again, a home win with a little bit of work that Ipswich have done in the transfer window. They've got a little bit stronger. Ben Godfrey looks quite good down the right hand side. They've signed Enciso from Brighton that we both like. So actually, for me, this could be a bit of an interesting week in the sense that I've got Everton and Ipswich to both win, which drags Leicester back into the trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I've got those results as well. I mean, and then obviously, I'm not going to tell you the score, but I've got a Wolves loss as well, so that just compounds the misery. I think with the players that Ipswich have got and have signed, I mean, just on a side note, Enciso should have been sent off, so they've been very, very fortunate to have him, and that was a stonewall red card. But you look at the players that both teams have got, and obviously the form. Southampton can't buy a win at all. You'd have to say this is an Ipswich win, but I mean, Southampton have looked better defensively than they did under Martin, so could be a draw. But Ipswich have got to be targeted. Every team that plays Southampton, when you're down the bottom, have got to be targeting them as a win.
Well, and Ipswich have got a very tough run of fixtures coming up after this. So again, when you're talking about sort of battles and inter-league leagues, this is a massive weekend for 4 of the bottom 5 playing each other. 4 of the bottom 6, 4 of the bottom 5, 4 of the bottom 5 playing each other. It could really start to give us an indication here of who can and who cannot get themselves out of trouble. And like you say, Ipswich cannot afford to not pick up 3 points against Southampton because, like I say, with their run coming up, you can see them going a while without picking up another 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back onto the Everton-Leicester game, you could say for both teams, the main thing is to not lose. I think if you pick up a point, both teams would probably go fair enough. I think when you look at the Ipswich-Southampton game, it's a must-win. I think if Ipswich draw with Southampton, yes, they'll take the point because it's a point to the tally, but 3 points is what they need from this game. So I think you're going to see probably a little bit more pressure on Ipswich in this game than Everton and Leicester and Wolves and Villa and other teams around them, just because they have to win this game.
Absolutely, yeah. Really, really interesting. And again, we move on to what again. I keep using the word interesting, so apologies, but I mean it. Newcastle host Fulham at St James's Park. 3:00 kickoff on a Saturday. Feels like they don't get many 3:00 kickoffs. Obviously, Newcastle bounced back from the hammering that Bournemouth gave them, but again against a Southampton team that you absolutely would expect them to win, but again had to come from behind. Where Fulham, you know, going through a little bit of a dip in foot. Fulham haven't beaten some of the teams that we would have expected them to beat off the back of the start they've had. You know, they drew with Ipswich, lost to West Ham that many might have thought would have won, and obviously then go and lose to Man United at home. So actually, you know, Fulham are in need of a little bit of a re-energise again, aren't they, to go again, because, you know, they're sat in 10th. You know, we were talking about them as being a European contender not long ago, but they could very easily drop into that mid-table mediocrity of can't go up, can't go down, and their season starts to peter out very quickly if they're not careful.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Fulham are possibly on a bit of a decline at the minute. You know, they have picked up a few wins where they've beat teams that they should do, but where they have previously were beating teams where you've gone, oh, that's a bit of a surprise. They haven't done that in a while. They have looked a bit more toothless in front of goal. Like they haven't scored the goals that they have, and they have been opened up a little bit as well. I mean, Man United, who have been poor for quite a while, opened them up on the weekend as well. So I think again, I'm going home win, for me, home banker. I think with the form that Newcastle have got and the players that they've got, and, you know, Isak's still on fire. Like, all I can see here is a home win. I don't know about you.
Yeah, look, I think it's just interesting. Like, you know, the trouble for Fulham is that they've got a couple of forwards that are streaky in the sense that if they score a goal, you can see them scoring in the next 3 game weeks, but then you can see them going 4 games without a goal. Whereas actually Newcastle, they've got 3 or 4 players, you know, obviously Anthony Gordon, Isak as being 2 of them, that you actually every week can score. And so, you know, relying on Raul Jimenez and Muniz and Carlos Vinicius, you know, Alex Iwobi, you know, actually they've needed their suspension and Wilson to come off and score some goals. So I think Fulham are just lacking a little bit of that consistent goal scorer that gets them over the line in these sort of games.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the one thing that they do lack a bit, I mean, I was going to use the word pace. Now, I understand they've got Adama Traore and stuff, but in that general forward line, not from the wings, I think they probably just lack that bit of pace to run in behind. So Jimenez isn't that player, is he? Whereas, you know, Isak can do everything. He can run in behind. He can hold the ball up. He's got a bit of skill to get by someone. So I think they do just lack a bit more dynamism in that number 9 role, which is hurting them against some of the better teams.
We should probably apologise to Fulham fans because we know that they get very sensitive when we talk about them in a negative way. You've done amazing so far this season. Well done. You're in a good spot, much higher than we thought you might get to, but you're still a couple of players short of where you probably want to be. So, yeah, so far it looks like we're in agreement with most of these games, I think. And, of course, we then wrap up Saturday night with a Midlands derby, which will obviously add a little bit of excitement to it. 5:30 kick-off at Molineux. Wolves hosting Aston Villa. Now, obviously, Aston Villa have got Champions League this week. We know that Villa have not done particularly well after European games this season. So does that give the Wolves fans a little bit of hope that they might be able to get something from this game?
I think it has to give them hope, especially against a local rival as well. Wolves are at home. They should be targeting this game to pick up some points because, you know, with the other games that we've spoken about, somebody is going to be picking up points somewhere and taking them further away from them. So they have to be targeting this game, and especially as it's after a Champions League fixture for Villa and they've got that record, they have to be. If you to ask me, do I think they're going to pick up any points? The answer is no. I think from what I've seen of Wolves so far under the new manager, with the exception of the manager bans they have, I think they've looked really, really poor. I think their attacking output is heavily reliant on Cunha, who looks to have tapped out. All I can see is a Villa win here, and that's not because I think Villa have been particularly good this season. I just think they're going to have too much for a very, very poor Wolves team.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Wolves have definitely kind of fallen, haven't they? You know, like we talked about as many times as you mentioned it, the manager bounce, you know, they got excited obviously first couple of games, but actually very, very quickly. And I still think, if I'm being honest with you, that I still think that there was a couple of turning points, and Cunha, as I said this last week, Cunha looks to me like the news is kind of, you know, the flirting around him is kind of turned his head. He thinking he wants to be somewhere else. And actually, all of a sudden, everyone's gone from being Cunha's this amazing player to actually he's gone to becoming probably a liability, not actually playing very well. And that's one of the big drop-offs for me in this Wolves team currently is that they actually don't look a threat moving forward.
Yeah, and also they had a player sent. I can't remember his name. It's the central midfielder, wasn't it? Had a player sent off, so he's going to be suspended as well, and he's one of he's one of Wolves' main players as well. So I think it's going to be a really tough game for them. You know, Villa have picked up a bit of form. Yes, they've got a very poor record after Champions League, but Wolves aren't particularly a high pressing team, so I can't see them, outrunning them. It's when they've come unstuck before. So I do feel that this has got Villa win written all over it.
And Aston Villa, one of the teams that could well be busy in the back end of the transfer window. They're looking at Disasi from Chelsea. They're looking at João Felix from Chelsea. Obviously, there's still lots of people sort of flirting around John Duran as well, which, I'm sure the Felix and Duran things are linked. So that whole Chelsea-Aston Villa relationship, obviously they worked on Maatsen over the summer. That it could be something that's in it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think this one is the sort of game that Aston Villa need after Europe, ironically. You need that big game, that under the lights, atmosphere, energy. And I can really see Aston Villa sort of growing into that game and, maybe righting some of the wrongs they've had this season after European games.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I think it's the perfect game for them. Say stylistically, Wolves are back three, back five, won't be pressing very high, will allow them to get into the game. And like I said, local rivalry under the lights, I think it's perfect for them.
Yeah, a little bit of on the break football as well. Like I say, it could be a game of transitions. Who handles the transitions the best could come out on top. But again, I think we're probably in agreement when we come to our predictions. Now, for me, there's some real value in Sunday's fixtures. And I won't tell you what mine are, but let's just say that my £5 challenge for the week is a 13-1 Sunday accumulator. We start with Brentford. At the G-Tech, I just feel like I was have to say the G-Tech Community Stadium because I know that you like it. They host Spurs. I'm going to go early. This is my banker of the weekend.
Okay.
There's no way in the world that Brentford aren't picking up 3 points here. This is an absolute shoe-in. Spurs with a midweek game, 8 outfield players that are fit above the age of 18. There's absolutely no chance they get anything from Brentford. Brentford are way too organised. Way too uncontrolled. This is as easy a home game as Brentford are going to get for the rest of the season.
I think Brentford will win the game, just because you say Brentford are very good at home. Brentford score goals, Spurs concede a lot of goals, and the feeling around Spurs at the minute is very negative. So I absolutely can see Brentford winning, and I can't believe that they're not odds on.
Well, hence my surprise. I did it not long ago. 21-20 I've got on Brentford. To double my money on Brentford, with the form of both teams, with the situation of both teams, I think the bookies have got that horribly, horribly wrong.
Are there any players coming back for Spurs that we know of? So I know Maddison, he had sore muscles, but they said he's out for 3 games or 3 weeks. But I know there was a few injuries to Bissouma and Pape Sarr. So, I mean, is there anyone coming back for Spurs that they can have a bit of positivity?
The only player coming back before the game is Mickey van der Ven, who's in the squad for Thursday night's Europa League game. But I've got to be honest with you, I think that Spurs need to worry more about can they keep players on the pitch rather than who's coming back, because with another game between now and then, you could easily envisage 1 or 2 of those players that are currently obviously all operating in the red zone picking up an injury. So, it's just nuts that Spurs are in the place that they're in with all of that PSR wiggle room and all that good stuff that we spoke about. There's plenty of players out there that are available on loan. You even look at a Marcus Rashford. We're going to come on to Man United in a minute. And you look at Marcus Rashford as being somebody that if you really wanted to move the dial, you could at least get him in as a body. I'm not suggesting that he's the solution to Tottenham's problem, but he's not worse.
Ben Chilwell is perfect, isn't he? Most left backs injured, playing a right-footed person. Jed Spencer's been amazing, by the way. Since he's come in. Yeah, but he's just got injured. So someone like Ben Chilwell would be a great addition as well. I mean, I know that Spurs, they obviously need to keep the players fit, but Van der Ven coming back, if he can stay fit, is massive, because he'll be the only recognised enough, but also his pace allows Ange to play the game and the style that he wants to implement. So if Van der Ven can come back fit and stay fit, that's massive for Spurs. I'd say he's possibly the key player of all the injured players coming back.
No, yeah, the same with Arsenal. Will tell you Saliba is the main man. Absolutely, don't disagree with that. However, I just think that it's carnage to bring him back to play Thursday, Sunday.
It's a risk.
It's the gift that keeps giving. Really, is that they keep bringing players back. too early. They get injured again. My understanding is that Richarlison could well be out for a while because they brought him back and threw him into the deep end. So it's just a gift that keeps giving. I would say definitely have a look at the lineup they picked for Thursday night's Europa League game. But yeah, like I say I'm not veering on this. My home banker, my banker of the weekend, Brentford.
Are Spurs through in the Europa League already?
No.
So it's a game they have to win. So I was going to say, if they're through, you don't want to be playing Van de Ven, do you? You want to be wrapping him in cotton wool for as long as possible. But if they need to play to get him through, like you said, keep a lookout for that lineup as well.
So go on. Sorry.
No, go on. You go, and then I'll ask you a question about Spurs.
Well, I was just going to say, they're not guaranteed to go through without having to play 2 more games, which is obviously not a great idea with the squad space. So I think they're through. Again, I haven't kept up with any of the teams in terms of that European League, the way it works. But I think they're through. But the difference between going through as a seed and not having to play 2 more games, or going through having to qualify, is really what they should be focused on to get the players to play this game. But sorry, go on.
Yeah. So my question was going to be: I've seen a lot of talk, and I've seen somebody apparently is quite heavily related, close to the club, and I don't know who they are. That just saw this on Twitter, but they have laid the whole amount of blame to Ange's training methods of the reason why players are getting injured consistently. What do you think on the injury? I mean, is it purely bad luck, or is there something a bit deeper that Spurs should be looking at?
So many answers to that question, Fran. I'm going to start with saying that on the flip side of this conversation, people are telling us that Bournemouth have got loads of injured players, but we're not blaming the manager's training style on those injuries. So the first thing is that we're picking and choosing what stats. We do this all the time, by the way. We all do it. You and I do it as well. We pick and choose the stats we want to use and throw it against the team to fit a narrative. What I can tell you from someone inside the club is that Postecoglou has been brought into the boardroom and questions have been asked of his training agenda, his training routines, to find out whether the club feel that he is to blame for the injury. So that has happened, 100%, had that confirmed by somebody quite high up in the club. Now, I think it's more to this than that, and part of the problem is that actually a lot of these injuries are actually happening in games, not in training. Obviously, Solanke did a knee injury in training. What they've done, I feel, is because they've had some injuries, they've tried to rush a player back a little bit earlier than they should have. You look at Van de Ven, by the way, you look at Romero, both came back for 1 game, both went back off injured in that same game. Pape Sarr's now injured. Like everybody's in the red zone. And for me, this sits with, we spoke about it already, that planning of, they knew in the first week of December there was an injury crisis starting. And that's when they should have struck. They left it too late, which meant other clubs came into. So, for example, in the forward market that they were shopping in, Arsenal then came in because they had their injuries and started to confuse the situation for the forwards that they thought they were getting closer to, because actually Arsenal were looking in the same pond. And of course, you would pick Arsenal. Everybody would pick Arsenal over Spurs right now. So, Spurs are in a real pickle. And I think that it's going to need a little bit of luck for them to come out of this to get a full team back out anytime soon. And the fear that the Spurs fans that I know, and by the way, you can get tickets to these games, like no one wants to go and watch them anymore, is that they're going to get knocked out of 3 cups very, very quickly, back to back, if they don't get a full team back out again, because Liverpool will beat them, Aston Villa will beat them, and if they don't get straight through to the next round of the Europa League, they'll lose the playoff.
And looking from the outside, and obviously the main thing that gets thrown at Spurs is that they haven't won a trophy in so long. Could it be a good thing that that you might have to write off this season to be able to ensure that? I mean, I think Spurs will be fine in the Premier League, but if it starts getting tight and Spurs only have 10 available players, it's going to be very, very tough for Premier League games. So it might not be the end of the world to be knocked out of a few of the competitions. Not that it's what Spurs fans want, but that might have to be the sacrifice. So because of the bad recruitment strategy, what should have happened is 4 or 5 players should have come in on loan and transferred in to ensure that the squad was bolstered to allow to challenge on different fronts, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, it leads us nicely onto the Man United conversation, because actually that's what happened for Man United, right? That's what happened, and Ten Hag has been, kind of chewed the bullet off the back of it. Not great in the league, but there's 1-2 cups. It's something that gets thrown at Spurs and Spurs fans every time they talk. It's, well, you've not won anything in for however long. So actually, for Spurs, you could almost flip that back at your friend and say, actually, don't worry too much about the league. Pick up the points that you need to pick up to stay in the league, but go and win 3 cups. Because you are still in 3 cups.
But that's the
that
point.
That's
the point about picking the points up in the league that you need to. With the current run of form, though, the trajectory is that that's not going to be the case. So is it then a case of sacrificing a cup? The answer should have been no. What we'll do is get 4 or 5 bolstered into the squad to be able to compete on different fronts.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting how the fan base is split between Ange and Levy, and a combination of both, either or, and where the problem sits. But look, it would be very typical of Spurs to go and actually win on Sunday against a team you don't expect them to when they've lost against teams that you would expect them to beat. But like I say, with the team they'll be putting out, I can't see anything but a Brentford win. Talking of teams that need to do some business, I hear that Casemiro's available, Rashford's available. They're looking to bring in the left back for 30 million quid, Dorgu, I think it is. That's pretty much done now, apparently. Man United host Crystal Palace. Feels like they've played each other just last week. I feel like I just watched this game a couple of weeks ago. But actually, this now feels like probably a good time for Man United to be playing Crystal Palace. And again, without wanting to spoil it, I can see this being maybe a relatively comfortable home win.
Yeah, I think Palace are probably going to have I can see this ending as a draw, if I'm being honest, just because I think Man United flattered to deceive against Fulham. I think they were just slightly the better team, and so Fulham are on the decline. Palace have been on the up and seem to be becoming a lot more secure defensively, and are scoring goals. I like what Mateta's doing. Eze's coming into a bit of form. Kamada as well looks like he's starting to adjust to the Premier League. So I think Palace have got a bit more about them what Fulham have at the minute. So I can see this being a draw.
Yeah, I think it's great for Palace to be safe. Again, we're not talking about them anymore being anywhere near the bottom, which is great. So it shows that they're, again, getting some of their players back, getting the fitness back on. Obviously, losing Trevor Chalobah back to Chelsea was a bit of a blow, but actually, Lacroix come in and is actually, producing some fantastic numbers in 1v1s and looks like a really good defender. Another good acquisition. They've signed the young lad from Millwall that caused some controversy when he scored from 2-1. To make it 2-1 with 4 minutes to go, and his knee sliding in the corner. It's like, get the ball and get back to the halfway line, you nugget. But your first Premier League goal probably takes precedent. But Palace are probably where we thought they'd be, right? Mid-table, safe. And, it's looking okay. No one's talking about signing their big players. Gahey doesn't look like he's moving anywhere. Eze doesn't look like he's moving anywhere. So actually, if you can get through the window and keep their squad intact, that's pretty successful for Palace, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back to the beginning of the season, some people predicting top 4, weren't they? Just based on what they'd done at the back end of last season. But after the few weeks, I don't think Palace fans could have hoped for any more. I think that the trajectory that they've gone on from where they were, there was one point they looked to be bottom of the league and probably finishing there. They were that bad. But from there, they've kicked on. I don't think Palace could have asked for any more, to be honest. They probably just now need to then have that future planning in place to ensure that what happens next year is they just keep progressing and taking step by step forward.
It leads us on to the perception of the big game of the weekend. Arsenal host Manchester City at the Emirates. Obviously, massive in terms of the race for top 4 championship. How are we feeling? I know we touched on it last week. Are we saying that Man City are out of the title race, Fran? Is there anything they can do here? Or is this just now they are playing for pride and getting as high as they can? Or do you think if Man City beat Arsenal at weekend, we can throw them back in the mix as being in the title chase?
I think it's an interesting conversation because I don't believe that Man City, I mean, I did say they're not going to get top 4 after the recruitment. I think they're absolutely nailed on now. They're too far behind Liverpool to be able to catch them. So the only team that can catch them is Arsenal, but I don't think they are. I think Man City are favourites for this game. I think the way that Arsenal are playing at the minute, they don't inspire any confidence into me whatsoever that they can go and catch Liverpool. They don't score enough goals at all. They're not the Arsenal of last year. I think it's just a bit of a dead rubber of a game, to be honest. I think the league's sealed. I think Man City and Arsenal will finish in the top 4. I'm not excited and enthused about this game, if I'm being honest. I think it'll be a bore fest.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I do think Man City have at least tried to tackle some of their issues. Mamouche is a very, very good signing. Listening to somebody talking about sort of Egypt in the Cup of Nations that comes around in a not too distant future, and actually, him and Salah operating in the same team gives Egypt a real good chance of going deep into that tournament. And lots of top clubs were looking at him. And again, little cameo at the weekend in terms of the stuff I've seen. He looks good on the ball. And again, but again, you could argue they've got Doku, they've got Silvino.
Grealish.
They've got a couple of those players already that don't seem to be sort of quite gelling. So I see what you're saying, but for me, actually, I think this will be interesting to find out where they're both at in their evolution. Like you say, if Man City or Arsenal can go and get a statement win, I don't mean like a 1-0 scrap. I mean, go and actually give the other team a bit of a lesson, 2-3-0. Maybe they can go back on a run and start that journey. Because again, if Liverpool do draw against Bournemouth, which isn't the crazy side there in the world, Arsenal beat Man City, they're back to 4 points. They've still got to play. Like it's not. I'm trying to sell a bit of a dead horse. I get it, but there is still a chance.
Yeah, no, I do hope that Arsenal win the game. I have no allegiances. I hope that Arsenal win the game and Liverpool drop some points, just because it means that we'll have a proper title race. My fear here is that I think Arsenal are dipping at the wrong time, which I know when you look at their form and you look at, WW, I just think the way that they're playing doesn't inspire me. I don't feel that they've got enough to go and rip a team apart and score some goals. Scraped by Wolves on the weekend. And just on that as well, I think that's the most ridiculous red card I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, okay, yeah, I get it, but I just feel that like football fans are so OTT at the moment that I don't know. I think we've lost our heads a little bit, mate. If I'm honest, like the backlash was. Like, I get it wasn't, but I think there's bad decisions every week. Like Michael Richards come out and say it's the worst ever decision is crazy for me. It's not the worst ever decision at all.
It's not the worst ever decision. I think the thing that really annoyed me about it was the referee can get it wrong, that's fine, but VAR is there to step in and say you've got that wrong. It was quite clearly a trip. When you slow it down, it looks like you hold, you put a frame on the video and you still it down. It looks like a stamp, but it's not a stamp. When you see it in real life, it's just a trip. He's stopping. It's the most blatant yellow card you ever see. A red card. It was more of a foul than it was a red card. I just couldn't believe when I saw it in live and you see everything about it. I just think it highlights the decline of officiating and VAR. That's what VAR is there. And I know we speak about it all the while, so we'll move on very quickly. But that, to me, just highlighted why people are falling out of love with football. Like we mentioned it at the top, that football's about to eat itself. That is one of the main reasons for me why it's happening.
Yeah, like I say, I just think that fans of all teams, Arsenal quite high up on that list, need to just get off this kind of worries me, the world is against us type of mentality, the online media campaigns. I just think that bad decision, yes, but if you ask any supporter of any team, they'll highlight some bad decisions in the season that's happened and gone against them, whether it be a penalty decision, a goal that shouldn't have stood, an offside, like just this complete noise every time there's a slightly controversial decision is becoming wearing, actually.
Yeah, I
just that's part. I actually dial out.
Yeah, I thought the PGMOL, I had to get that right, are causing issues for themselves, though. They came out and in the statement it said about who's going to want to be a referee. And I thought that's not what you should be focusing on. Yes, so he's a human being and needs to be protected. But I thought you need to be focusing on your standards, because the higher that your standards of the officiating becomes, the less abuse you get. And that's going to attract more people to want to be referees. The reason they don't want to be referees is because they see the level of abuse, because the standards have fell so low. So I think they're almost bringing it like full circle, aren't they? It's going to be self-fulfilling because they're just not identifying what the problem is when the fans can see it. I think that's the biggest problem for me.
Yeah. I was watching Sky Sports, Gillette Soccer Special, whatever it's called these days, and Mike Parry, who's the referee that's on there? Mike Dean. And he said it was a red card from a certain angle. So again, he said like, from that angle definitely not, but he said but from this angle it's a red card. And I think sometimes it's a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas. Like Arsenal fans probably aren't the most balanced. And the same with everybody, but this is not a dig at Arsenal. If it was against Man City, the Man City fans are not going to give a balanced view if they feel it's against their team or their players. It's just how it works.
Yeah, I mean, going back onto the Arsenal City game, I'd love them to go and win Arsenal just to open up the title race again. But I just feel at the minute in time, with the way that they're playing, I feel that Man City are favourites, which you wouldn't have said a few weeks ago, and I think they'll go on and win, which will just open up a bigger gap.
Well, the beauty of football is it's played on grass, not on paper, and I think interesting time, interesting weekend. Really, genuinely looking forward to this one. And I, as much as I'm confident that Sunday's accumulator, it wouldn't surprise me if I got all three of them wrong as well. And we move on to Monday night football, the Graham Potter derby. I didn't think I'd be saying that this season. Chelsea host West Ham, again, West Ham decimated with injuries, lacking that forward sort of firepower, but showing good fight. And the West Ham fans have got very excited about that comeback against Villa. Although it didn't lead to a victory, it does show that they're moving in the right direction. And at a time where Chelsea actually are looking to start to maybe struggle a little bit, Fran.
Yeah, Chelsea are a strange one, aren't they? They seem to be creating chances, but they're so wasteful in front of goal. Like Nicholas Jackson, for all the praise that he gets, with his work rate and the runs that he makes, he's very wasteful in front of goal. I think this is an interesting game. You can start to see Graham Potter's moving the style of play forward. Slowly. It's going to take some time, but he is moving that forward, and I think the West Ham fans are liking what they're seeing, aren't they? So yeah, I think this is a good game. I'm really intrigued to watch it. Normally, there's quite a few yellow cards flying around as well in this game, isn't there? So yeah, good watch.
Yeah, the interesting thing for Chelsea is that they started the season beating teams, that you would expect them to beat. Like they just kind of went on a very consistent run. But actually, in the last 5, they've lost to Ipswich. They've drawn with Palace. Okay, obviously the Bournemouth, Bournemouth are doing a bit, but at home you would have expected Chelsea to beat Bournemouth. They went on and beat Wolves that can't seem to win the game, and then of course, losing comfortably to Man City at the weekend. And it's interesting that you speak about at the front, but for me, and again, I have lots of Chelsea friends. All they talk about is the goalkeeper. And actually, he gives away a goal a game. He gives away a goal a game, and therefore they've got to score 2 to have a chance. And actually, they're not worried about. Not one of the Chelsea fans I speak to are talking about buying forward players. They're all saying we need a goalkeeper immediately.
That's the most glaringly obvious position that they can improve on very easily. And I've said so many times, he's not fit at the minute, he's out injured, but you put the Leicester Mads Hermansen goalie in there, he improves them. He worked under. He's the most obvious transfer. Worked under Enzo previously. Knows everything what he's about. Knows his strengths. He fits into that Chelsea team like a glove. Robert Sanchez is not good enough. Like I said, the goal that when Haaland chipped him, what is he doing? Like, he hasn't gone to come and challenge the ball. He's just in no man's land. Like, he is the biggest. He's the most obvious upgrade candidate for the whole of the Premier League.
Let's not forget that they've actually got a goalkeeper that's currently playing Premier League football in Kepa.
He's doing well.
Already in their ranks. Like again, did we all kind of brush him under the carpet a little bit too quick? Because I've not heard anybody moaning about Kepa this season. In fact, Bournemouth keep clean sheets. They're obviously, as we've just discussed, very, very good at both ends of the pitch. They've already got the world record costing goalkeeper in their books. Is it just sometimes that Chelsea don't know the wood for the trees because they've got so many players and they've actually got the answer looking within their squad already?
Even, is it Petrovic? I think he's out on loan as well. I think they have sent him out on loan. But when he played, he looked half decent as well. So I think that you're right. There is alternatives in the squad that are better than Sanchez. I think it probably goes back to, we had a conversation about Danny Ward and, that the fans had already lost trust in him. I don't know whether the Chelsea fans have already lost trust in Kepa and that's not a move that they would make. But yeah, he's a far better goalie than what Robert Sanchez is. And I've seen a few of the clips of him out on loan. He went out on loan to like League One and League Two teams years ago. He was making those sorts of mistakes then. So he's clearly an error-prone goalkeeper. He's made 4 errors, I think, in the past 5 games that have led to goals. Like he needs to be binned off as soon as possible. And I mean that with the greatest respect because he's costing them points. And when you spoke about Kepa, Chelsea are one place, level on points with Bournemouth. If there was the ability to pull that loan, would you not be doing it now just to ensure that Bournemouth are weakened?
Yeah, I don't know what the terms of the loan were. Probably there is no recall clause would be my guess. But like you say, it would be a tactical masterstroke on both sides. You could almost say you can have Sanchez and we'll have Kepa.
Yeah. Well, even just to pull him and just one, improve your goalkeeping position, but 2, hurt your rivals for the top 4 or 5 makes complete. Quite clearly, it's too logical so there must be no recall clause. But if there is, that's the route they need to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't disagree. Let's get into our predictions, and we start right back at the beginning. 12:30 Saturday at the City Ground. Nottingham Forest host Brighton. As I said at the start, this could be one of any 3. I don't know which way you're going, but you are going
1-1.
Okay, I'm going to go 2-1 Nottingham Forest. Chris Wood to score the winner. I think that they might just have enough at home and they need that bounce back if they're going to get that European football. My game of the weekend, Bournemouth host Liverpool at the Vitality. What do you think this one's going to be, mate?
I'm going to go Bournemouth 1, Liverpool 2 with a late winner.
I am going to go for a 2-2. I'm going to go 2-2. I think Bournemouth could cause a little bit of an upset there. And again, I could see that being either one team goes 2-0 up and the other team bring back. I could see that being maybe like you say, late goals. That's interesting. Goodison Park, won't be saying that for too much longer. Everton host Leicester, that relegation 6-pointer that we spoke about. The score will be...
Should we just both of us put 1-0 now?
Fine, move on. Watch it be 6-5 to Leicester. It's going to be an absolute goal fest. We'll all be waiting up to watch Match of the Day to see the 15 goals scored at Goodison Park, more than the rest of the season put together. No, 1-0. Ipswich host Southampton at Portman Road. I think we've both got the same score, but it'll be interesting what we do with the numbers. What have you got?
Ipswich 2, Southampton 1.
I'm going 3-1 Ipswich. I think Ipswich have got some good attacking players. I think hopefully it's a nice open game, and I can see some goals in that game. And we finish the 3 o'clock games with Newcastle hosting Fulham at St James's Park. Again, I think we're both in agreement on the result, but the score will be
3-1.
Yeah, I got 3-1. So let's see if we can pull that one in like we did last week with Man City. Saturday night football, Midlands Derby, Molineux Stadium. Wolves host Aston Villa. The score will be
Wolves 0, Villa 2.
Wolves 1, Aston Villa 3. It's a great fixture, isn't it? It's like a traditional fixture. Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Aston Villa. It feels like it's going to be from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, or any decade, couldn't it, that one? Love it. Sunday, Brentford host Spurs at the G-Tech Community Centre. 2 o'clock kickoff, live on Sky. The score will be?
Brentford 2, Spurs 1.
I think this is going to be high scoring, crazy, God knows what. I'm going to go 3-2 Brentford. 3-2 Brentford. Same time, different location, obviously, Old Trafford, where there's a bit of controversy about whether the government are or not going to fund any refurb there. We won't touch that now. But Man United host Crystal Palace. The score will be?
1-1.
I'm going to go for 2-1 to Manchester United. I think Manchester United win that. Arsenal at the Emirates need the win to keep that championship race alive, but they host a tough test in Manchester City. The score will be?
Arsenal 0, Man City 1.
I am going to go for a 1-2. So Arsenal 1, Manchester City 2, with Haaland scoring at least 1. Monday night football, the return of sees Chelsea host West Ham at Stamford Bridge. Lots of bother boys. Could see there being a good little punch up at some point in one of the tube stations in London. Bunch of middle-aged men with no hair and big bellies fighting each other over a game of football. But the score will be?
Chelsea 2, West Ham 1.
I'm going to go 1-0 Chelsea. I can see that being low scoring, actually. I think that could be a low scorer, and it could be actually a lot tighter than people think. Okay, cool. Good stuff. So now let's go to your £5 challenge. Again, probably would just be better off giving a random person £5 and seeing what they do with it. But what have you gone for this week, Fran?
You were close last week. Villa just let you down, didn't they? Obviously, it was landing. I've gone for a fourfold. I can't tell you what the odds are, though, because I've not done it yet. But I'm going for Everton, Villa, Brentford and Manchester City, which I know that a few of those are odds again. So I think it'll be pretty decent odds. It'll be over 10-1.
Definitely over 10-1, because my treble is 13-1. So my £5 returns nearly £72. Brentford, Manchester United and Manchester City all to win on Sunday. All of them are odds on 21-20, 21-20 and 12-5. Nearly 3-1 for Man City feels crazy numbers. Manchester United to beat Palace at home feels very high as well. You said Everton, didn't you?
Yes, I've gone Everton, Villa, Brentford and City.
Everton, Villa. Whilst I'm here, I might as well. Everton, Villa, Brentford and City. Oh my God, my laptop's playing all kinds of silly games with me just to wind me up. You have got a 24-1 accumulator, meaning £5 returns £125.
Lovely. Banker. My banker of the week, I'm going to go for Man City to beat Arsenal. I think they are, with the odds as well, you're getting a good bit of value there. Can't see Arsenal scoring. I think City will beat Arsenal.
Yeah, so I've got Brentford as my banker of the weekend as well. So as always, let's keep an eye on see how we get on. Fran, thank you very much, buddy. A little bit longer this week, but hopefully all good. Where can people find us? Where can they reach out and touch us?
Well, if you want to touch us, come and find me. That'd be absolutely fine. But if you want to reach out to get in touch with us, we are on Twitter, X, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok as well. I'm going to try and get YouTube sorted this week as well. So I'll try and get it uploaded to YouTube. So that'll be a new channel. But to listen to it, obviously, it will be YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. If you want to come on, just get in touch. We're going to try and get some guests on soon. So yeah, get in touch. And if you could do us a favour, just follow the channel on any of the podcast suppliers. Follow us on Twitter mainly. Get involved with us, help us get our name out there and grow the channel.
As always, mate, my favourite hour of the week. Thank you very much. Look forward to catching up next week.